Dr. James has served over 2,000 congregations,
Wow.
nationally and internationally, providing applied theological training and support in leadership development and congregational health. She has served as a national and international speaker in Finland, Estonia, several cities in South Africa, Istanbul, and as well as numerous locations in the Caribbean and Virgin Islands. She has been instrumental in planting of churches and providing pastoral care to pastors throughout the western region of the U.S. In light of this pandemic, I actually, prior to that, you have reimagined, you have rebranded yourself in many different areas. I just want you to share with us, from your perspective, how you have rebranded and reimagined ministry in your own life.
Thank you. I think one of the greatest needs is for us to be honest and transparent. So there have been many changes. Some may have been due to what I thought was careful planning. Some may have been forced. Some may have been the result of lack of success in previous endeavors. So my life was cobbled together, not that it was just this wonderful march down the red brick road. I'm prepared as a psychologist, but not a clinician. So I give a respectful nod to those of you on the screen who are. I worked, however, in therapeutic environments, coming out of Rutgers with a mixed background academically in terms of research psychology in therapeutic environments and in education. And so that prepared me to begin working in academic settings, and that's where I started. In that time, behavior modification was the big thing. So I worked in training people behavior mod for autistic children. And then from there, went to the university at the University of Pittsburgh. I was fortunate, more than fortunate. I was triple blessed, exponentially blessed to be under an African-American genius who was head of the department, Dr. Jerome Taylor, who is still marvelously at the university and was so much in the vanguard of thinking. And along with, I was always at the tail end of that. The credit and the mind goes to him and to others. But there were 3 African Americans in the psychology department. And the timing was right financially with mental health funds. And we were able to establish, along with the city in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, what was called Hill House. It was a community center. A good portion of it was devoted to community mental health. You heard of Hill House in the Hill District of Pittsburgh? Or? I can't hear you.
No. We have another Hill House that just blew me away. Just the name of it. That's wonderful.
Yeah, that was there. And so there we did more research and working with, at that time, schizophrenic families. We didn't really have the terminology for bipolar yet. Families where there were addictions and treatment, looking at changes across modalities of speech, facial expression, voice inflection, and what it indicated, and began training paraprofessionals in the community to go into families in urban areas in Pittsburgh, had all of the challenges of any of our large urban cities, to work in families with mothers and children. In doing that, it was an opportunity to begin working for WQED. That was around the time of Mr. Rogers and educational television, and writing scripts for mothers and children, how they could interact to facilitate learning and development. Later, during that time, I felt a call to ministry. We moved to the West Coast. We were a young couple, 2 children, been married 52 years. That's another tweak I have to do, that intro. That's an old one they sent you. So my sweetheart from age 15, when I wasn't allowed to have a sweetheart, but we've been married 52 years. And we didn't have a car. Our car was on the East Coast and 2 small children. So we walked to a nearby church, and that was Missionary Baptist Church. And there I felt a call to ministry. The pastor had the fortitude and the courage to let me do an initial sermon I heard later he was greatly penalized for that. I don't know how much truth is to it. He was a Dallas pastor. I guess it's okay to call his name. Recently passed away, Reverend Timothy Smith. I'm sorry, Reverend Timothy Price. Some of you may know him, but he was in California. And then from there, went to serve under Bishop Ernestine Cleveland Reams. I found myself challenged to have access to the kind of training and the things that have to be caught. It was difficult to do in that context, even though it was a very warm church and the pastor was very receptive. It was a shock to some of the members, but great people. And even moved, so I moved, I should say, my background is Wesleyan holiness. I grew up in Church of God, Anderson, which is not Pentecostal.
Bishop James, just a quick pause. So your first sermon was in a missionary Baptist church.
Baptist church. I was president of the junior mission in my early 20s. I had graduated from grad school at that point, had 2 small children. So that's a show all in itself. It's just that experience. Get your own water. That kind of thing. It was good for me. Good learning, good people. And actually it was my husband that said, we need to move because you're not able to go into the office to hear the discussions, be part of the planning. He was a trustee, but he had access that I didn't have. So we moved our membership, and I sat mostly. I subsequently worked as chaplain to the singles ministry, but I mainly needed to sit. So I sat under the ministry of Bishop Ernestine Cleveland Reams. Both of these experiences were vastly different from my growing up in a Wesleyan holiness congregation, which was hymn singing, much more in a Methodist mode. And stayed there for a good long time, was privileged to serve with some of the real powerful voices that we heard. Yes.
Bishop James, if I may pause you again.
Please do.
Being from a Wesleyan background, Methodist, what's Wesleyan holiness for all the other Methodists that are listening? And then we have some holiness. So what's Wesleyan holiness?
I'll give my try at it. Wesleyan holiness is, I'll tell you what it's not, all the things you shouldn't do to define. It is holiness in terms of emphasis on lifestyle and behavior, without a Pentecostal or charismatic experience. So, Church of God Cleveland would be
legalism,
but Wesleyan holiness, less emphasis on the sacramental and the residuals of Episcopal ministry that you might find in Methodists. Less of that. Part of the Reformation movement that was developed, not tied to Azusa Street, but part of the Reformation movement that empowered laity, very much was anti the formalities and the protocols that had accompanied clergy in the previous periods. So pastors were brother and sister, this or that, emphasized education, particularly college and graduate education, solid family, and in my opinion, youth orientations and clear Christian education. I'm not championing that. That was a part of my experience. For me personally, it was not the fullness of the experience I needed. For me, and I try to be careful about that, I needed a lot more. That's the foundation, though, and continues to be my foundation. But for the path that I had, I sought and hungered for a deeper personal experience with what remained a mystique to me, and that was, as some would say, a move of the Holy Ghost, an unction that I could not describe, a passion that exceeded anything that I had even heard talked about, a place that was so deep in me that nothing satisfied it. Trying to live, as I knew, a Christian life was good, but not good enough. So I felt depleted and needed an experience of victory and joy, an experience of seeking, of scratching it out that I did not receive there. But nevertheless, after all of that is gone, I think it is our having a biblical orientation from the Church of God that continues to be what I consider my home church, and that roots me very much. Tell me if I'm off track or you can't hear me.
But,
So after,
I'm sorry, Bishop James.
no, this helps.
No.
It's
Oh no,
conversation, right?
no. I'm sorry. No. I just need to. I just need to shout for a moment. Oh, glory.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Woo. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
The
All right.
I even found that there were people who were close to my mother, her friends. My dad had a Church of God background, Anderson. I always have to say Anderson because there are about 10 different groups called Church of God. And my mother had an apostolic, which was a very Pentecostal orientation. Her father was the pastor. So I had this tongue-talking, praying mother at home with the women in the living room and a hymn singing, very structured dad. And we went to the Church of God for 11 o'clock service. And when that was over, we went around the corner to the Apostolics, which were the same small group from my family. I was born in Alabama and we moved north. My family was from Alabama on both sides. So after some time and we're thankful that she's still alive. And we're so grateful for the forging and the valor of Bishop Ernestine Cleveland Rames, who was just a looming figure. I don't know how else to describe her. Was and still is. What really came to mind, if this is a sisterhood, and what I didn't say that I was thinking was she was a tough cookie. That's what I really was thinking, but I mean no disrespect with that. So fun and engaging, but also very regimented about prayer and fasting and consecration. And so that introduced another dimension in my life that I really needed. I grew up under a pastor who had us fasting or encouraged fasting, not in a harsh way, but in an invitational way in high school. So it was an opportunity to go back to that. There's still things about that experience. She came out of a Kojic background that were not a good fit for my background as a hymn singing girl. But I gleaned from that environment. I received a call to pastor while I was there, afraid to acknowledge it. And with much urging and trying to detour, and I don't say that out of some modesty, it was clearly fear and a lack of trust in God. We planted our first church in our living room. I was teaching at Cal State Hayward University at the time, and people would ask questions that I couldn't appropriately respond to in a state-funded public university. So we started inviting them to our home on Saturday night for Bible study and engaging in dialogue. I was simultaneously working at an employment training that was the days of CETA. I don't know if anybody's old enough to remember that federal legislation, but employment training. And I was used to being a professor, and I had a secular job, and I had a executive director from Pakistan, and he was afraid I'd leave. So he said, if you work this job, I'll let you leave and go down the street to the university and teach every course you have to teach. So I was able to do both and just run back and forth for 5 or 6 years. Then left there and decided I really needed more than a PhD. I needed a seminary education. So I left, began to work for a ministry that had been spawned in theory by Tom Skinner, New York, one of his mentees. Dr. Stanley Long started a Christian school. Am I taking too long? Oh, in San Francisco. So that was a chance to bring the education in, writing a curriculum for leadership. You remind me of that figure out of Chicago, the woman educator. Marva, I can't remember Marva's last name. I want to say during the 80s, anyone old enough to remember the 80s? She was a pace setter in education and classroom techniques. I can only remember her first name. Anyway, it was during that time. And there were lots of funds available for grant writers on leadership development with urban Black youth. So in San Francisco, actually wrote the grants and the curriculum, served as the first principal for Fellowship Academy, which is a school there. Now, after a couple years, I had issues with the board. As I told you, everything wasn't planned. And I refused to paddle students. They thought some of our children would only respond to a paddle. And I thought maybe they might, but that wasn't my method in academic setting. And I thought perhaps we can begin early disciplining our children to respond to verbal instruction rather than directing them toward that kind of corporal experience. So after a while, I left there and without the grants, started the same school. Since I wrote the curriculum, I kind of had some ownership of the intellectual property in Oakland, in a Jehovah Witness cinder block uniform building, and happened to go. I was pastoring out of my house, moved the church after a week to another congregational church. So we had 8 o'clock service. Then I'd go to work at the county and then come home and whatever. So we moved the ministry we were leasing and bought a building, Jehovah Witness building, not that large. In the aisles, we did the school. In about a year, it turned to the third hottest drug spot in Oakland. We could no longer have church. I came to church one day. My dad was out front cleaning blood out of the driveway. That was in the days of the drug czar, if you remember, in our country's history. So church changed. Everything changed. It didn't make sense to go in and sing hymns or shout the victory. And children dying. There were 5 crack houses in what had been a very quiet neighborhood, and our church was in the center. And because the street came to a peak and the church was here, it was a key spot because dealers could see the police coming from either direction. So we sought the Lord, and he gave direction. There was a grace for that season. I don't have that grace now. You have to have the grace for the season you were in. So I work at the county before work, on my lunch hours, and after work, we'd work the street. And we did, what do you call those block clubs, which was fine. It was during the days of a large Asian refugees coming from many places. So there were many languages in that one block. And to tell you the foolish thing is what it looks like now. I can say that Paul said it. A drug deal would be made. The drug dealers would go to the curb. The buyers would come down the street. It was usually in front of the church because that was the middle of the block. When the dealer went to the driver's window, we went to the other side at the same time, and we had a camera position to take pictures of the drug deals. This is crazy, but it's true. When the purchaser would drive off, my car would be ready. My job after that was to jump in the car, follow the buyer, and pull them to the curb, pulling in front of them. Is that nuts or is that stupid? But that's what we did. We pull them over and say, I saw you, but that doesn't matter. The Lord who loves you saw you. And those are our sons and those are our daughters. And you have a better future, and so do they. These were generally people from the suburbs who came into the inner city, or they were city or county workers, often in government vehicles, who bought their drugs there. And no matter what kind of car that we pull them over, and then we say, may I offer you prayer, and may I offer you Jesus. What we did not know is that Washington was watching that spot. It was such a menace in the country. I was at the county working. You can now call it diversity officer. I was a budget manager and also affirmative action officer. That was EO days. We didn't use the term diversity. And I got a call saying, this is Leah Garrity. And I thought she said from the lighthouse. And I said, we have no more clothes to give out. We've given out all the food we have this week, but we'll get back to you. She said, no, Leah Garrity, if I remember the name correctly, it's been a while, from the White House. I said, the White House? And that's what led to, they said, we've been watching what that little small church did.
Wait, hold a second. You told the White House that you didn't have any more clothes to give out.
Their representative, I thought she was saying lighthouse, sounded like a mission. So they brought 3-4 of us to Washington. And the irony of this is, this sounds like great, acclaim, White House ceremony, medals, lunch with President Bush Sr., all that was good. And plaques galore, letters from Congress, our state legislature, but nothing that made an impact on the street. Not one little boy that we'd stop from being a lookout. Did we have more to help his family or his mother, because he had paid the rent. Not anything. The Oakland A's had us toss the ball out or whatever we did at the stadium. All kinds of great, things were thrown to me as a face of it. But the work, the mission, the life of it was not me as a person. And that was, it was a learning lesson. And after all the glamour and the glitz, we went back to the street and worked that, closed all of those crack houses in that block. The worst one was across the street from the church. It was a 6-unit apartment building. Still had a Mazda-sized churches. Most Church of Gods, most of them are not mega churches. And my husband said, well, the only thing I think we can do is the church doesn't have enough money to do that. We're buying the building. Everything's going into the street ministry. Let's mortgage our house. So it's all we had. We mortgaged our home and bought the 6-unit apartment building. He became planning director of Oakland at that time. He had been assistant planning director of San Francisco. So he went and got a real estate license and a broker's license and learned how to manage property, how to evict the drug dealers because lives had been lost in that building. The doors were off, the bathroom facilities were pulled up, all the filth and things that go along, prostitution, just terrible things that were happening there. And he worked in the weekends, learned the carpentry, learned how to lay the carpet, put the plumbing back in, how to fix the washers and dryers and the laundromat in the building, how to do the painting, and began to turn that block around. And today we're grateful. It was a double block, but not a whole community change, just that double block. And many things came out of that. We're grateful. I should stop and pause. We're around 1991 by now. So I don't know. Maybe I'll let you ask some questions.
No, I think this is where we need to be. I think this is continue.
Just talk. I like to talk. All right.
Absolutely.
So, that's the early 90s. In the mid 90s, if I have my timing right, and I often don't, our first mission trip was, let's see, what order did it come in? The first trip, I felt I want to go to Africa. That's where I wanted to go. I felt I could relate to that, and I was delighted to go, but I didn't get an invitation. The first invitation came to go to Finland through someone who had been a chemist that I knew and was a professor there and said, I know a little lady, invite her to come. So went to the United Methodist Church in Turku, Finland, my first international revival. And I was very intimidated, had an ugly attitude because I felt I should be somewhere with Black people because I could relate to Black people. I wanted to tell them about the experience in the inner city and on the street. And I was just ignorant enough, and that was true. That's where I wanted to be. So I went the first week, and I was kind of, I guess this is really the late 90s, the first trip, mid to late 90s. There was no breakthrough in the Bible. I could feel it. I'm ministering, but there was no connection. Probably was my awful attitude. And the Lord was just very patient with me because I was like, I don't need to be here. I don't understand these people. I don't understand Finnish. I don't understand Swedish. And they're talking 2 languages I don't know. I'm the only Black face in the building. I have nothing in my background. I don't know what I'm doing here. So I'm just whining to the Lord and going home. And about middle of the week, the Lord began to humble me because I knew I was not reverencing the opportunity or his people. I was so stuck in some small, narrow, ethnic nationality corner and crevice in my little mind. And my mother's mantra for me as a little child always was, prepare to serve humanity. It was never the church, not a community, not a race. All of my life, she said, prepare to serve humanity. So midway through the revival, I cried out to the Lord and said, the word's not connecting. My messages are not on target. I don't know what's going on. I need your help. And as I cried out to the Lord, he began to break me, not them, but me. And these are odd experiences. These were mostly, they were university personnel in the UMC, and they were highly educated people, engineers, lawyers, mostly scientists. And they brought what I call a little throw rug, the kind of mat you put in front of your kitchen sink. And while I would minister, they would get up and take a little mat, put it in front of the pulpit, sit there and look at me a while. Every now and then they'd lay down, they'd sit back up, roll up the little mat, go back to seat. 3 or 4 others would come. So I didn't understand. I was in a strange place. I asked the pastor hosting me, what are they doing? Why do they keep coming up to the altar and sitting down? She said, they know that you are Black. They've been listening to Walter Hawkins' music, and they are waiting to be slain in the Holy Ghost. And so they are bringing rugs to the service to sit on so that when you speak and they get slain, they're going to go back on the little mats. These are professors. These are highly educated people. And I went back to my room and I cried some more. And I said, oh God, forgive my arrogance, forgive my self-righteousness. But people hungry for the Holy Ghost. And I'm standing up here giving them a 3-point message because I figure they're educated. I'm educated too. So that broke it. And I went back with a different attitude. The Lord began to change. And we saw what I call a move of God in the service. About 2/3 of the way, still in that little over week revival, might have been 7 to 10 days. They said, we're going to go down to the square. That's like a civic center in Turku. I was used to doing service because of the drug dealers on the back of trucks, going to the park, megaphone. That was my thing. I could do that. So we got there and they said, you're going to have a megaphone? I said, oh, yeah, I'm glad that I can handle this. I'm going to be outside and preach the word. I had gotten in a different space for the service. Then the skinheads came. And they began to use those N words and the words that brought Alabama and Montgomery back to mind, and dogs and hoses. And I'm over here in Finland, and the only brown skin that I was seeing, and skinheads throwing bottles toward the little stage. I'm sorry, I thought everything was off. I don't know how that happened. My apologies. Skinheads throwing bottles while we're trying to minister. And I got intimidated again. But the Lord will bring things to your remembrance. He said, while you were trying to go to Africa, I was preparing you in the middle of what was going on, and begin to tell me the spirits are the same in any country. The adversary is the same adversary. But the wind of God, hallelujah, that brings life is the same wind. The healing hand is the same hand. So the enemy you fought, that you were pleading for young lives and drug addiction, is the same enemy that comes with different isms, whether it's sexism or racism. And I'm starting to cry. I'm a big crier. And the Lord brought deliverance there. The end of the revival, about that time, and I salute and give tribute. I heard you say Bishop Vaughn is on the line. I have to insert this. The Lord has not so much has been me, but he's used powerful, gigantic, unimaginable women of God who have worked the road. And I stumbled and came along and was able to pick up some of the leavings. I was a roof behind Bishop Vaughn, who represented women on the Joint College of Bishops when they were not, they could sit there but not represented. And not only her, but the same with Bishop Reams. The Lord, maybe through pity and mercy, allowed me to be the one where it said, Ruth got some handfuls on purpose. I got some handfuls that someone else took the lick for, or that had the endurance for. And I pray there's some young women that I have pushed the gate open that come along the same way. So there were some things going on at the end of this revival. I was looking forward to being consecrated to the office of bishop. I guess this was the second. I've jumped to another trip to Finland a few years later, the next crusade, we called them. And at the end of the meeting, I said to the Lord, now you bless the people, but will you give me something? I'm empty. I want something from you. Give me something, please. We had heard about, there's an area called the Lapland that was north in Finland. And there had been a person who was incarcerated and got words from what was happening in the service at the Bethlehem United Methodist Church in Turku. And he sent testimony back. The message was going out because the Lord had moved me to the side successfully and was working. But I was whining again at the end of the service and said, Lord, can you give me something to go home with? I need something in me. I'm empty. And I thank you for all you've done this week. And I had been trying to prepare for the consecration to the office of bishop. I needed to put together what would be an emblem. Normally, you notice that there's some form of a crown that's used, and I could see it in my mind, but I couldn't give the artist what I wanted to be sketched. The scriptures came to me that I felt needed to be the style and the biblical orientation for the ministry, different aspects of where the Lord had taken me, the academic part, the mission part, but I couldn't get it all together. But particularly that crown was troubling me. And I didn't want the one that most of the brothers used. At the end of the last service, there was someone who was translating from Swedish to Finnish to English. I had to go through two interpreters. A little brother sitting in the back said, can I talk to the evangelist? And I went to the back, and he said, all week the Lord has had me sitting here, and he's been giving me something to give to you. And he was an artist, and he gave me a camera-ready logo for the ministry with the crowns, with the what looked like clouds for the glory of God. Every aspect, I still have it. He had it, the healing of the nation. He didn't know anything about this. He said, these leaves on this crown are for the healing of the nations. That was part of the scriptures the Lord had given. It was all right there. He said, I don't know why, but the Lord had me draw this and give this to you. And that was the last piece I needed to get ready, not really the last, but last hurdle to get ready for the consecration services. And the Lord's done all kind of miracles for me. That gets you to the late 90s right there, around 2000. I'm skipping so much. And let's see, I can't count back. The first church was planted in 81, incorporated in 82. That was one in the living room. In 97, before 97, early 90, our church was predominantly Black with some other West Indies involved. Began to pastor a white congregation also. These were in the Church of God, also in the city of Oakland. I don't remember how long I was there. It was about 11 to 14 years. So I was doing this church that we planted and then the other service. No dispersions being cast. That service was 1 hour. Say what you got to say. Go home, sing a hymn. So I played the piano, got off the piano, and ran up to the pulpit, gave the message, went back to the piano, played the closing hymn, and they paid me, I think it was $35 a week when they had it. And that was 11 to 14 years. And the church I had planted was no salary. I got offerings when they could afford it, even though the church grew, but we had so much mission, and I worked full time. Then in 97, I was called to a third congregation. So we had a 9 o'clock service, 11 o'clock service, 9 o'clock. I don't remember if it was 10 or 11, the second one. Then the one we planted had more of my DNA as opposed to the churches I had been called to. So they were very flexible. They were very charismatic, although Church of God. The other two were very traditional. So we did the most traditional in the morning. Then we warmed up a little bit, went to the traditional African-American church. the one that had my DNA started at the same time as the traditional African American church, but they were just finishing praise and worship after an hour. So when I got there, things were all afire, and I just went in and do the sermons. So we did those 3 churches almost for 15 years. When we left California in 2012, we were doing 2 of them. We had combined the early one and the middle one. And so I've been here 9 years now, just to update that resume. I don't know what else you want me to talk about.
I actually want to hear how you came. Well, tell our viewers how you came to Dallas. What drew you to Dallas?
Okay. I don't like to sound spooky and mystical, but I'll just be honest. I usually do things not out of as much faith as I was like, but often out of desperation. That's just the truth. I say, I can't stay in this stage any longer, Lord. And if you don't do something for me, I'm not going to make it. I'll just be honest. That's the way I pray. I say, if you don't help me out, I'm not going to do well. And I don't even have a desire to go on if you don't help me. That's how bad it is. That's just kind of how I talk to the Lord. And I knew I had outgrown the congregations where I was pastoring. When I picked up the 3rd church, that was the 2nd jurisdiction that was assigned to me. Of 60 congregations, 10 of which were African American, 6 I think were Hispanic, and the rest were Caucasian. And that was Northern California, Northern Nevada, the Guam, and Hawaii. That was the district. And I had another jurisdiction that had been all African American, which I got kicked out of because the brothers decided there wasn't enough room for men to move up. So why should a woman have 2 jurisdictions? So I said, let's have an election, get permission for it, and I'll support you, and let's move on. That was fine. But there's some funny things about that too. But I knew I had outgrown, not because I was so big, but because when you're operating purely on God's strength, and you know you don't have it, you know when you're at the end of it because you don't have anything personal to supply. And I was frustrated getting up before the main congregation that we had planted every Sunday. I was cranky inside. It's like, they're not doing the AV right. They're not doing the music right. They're not doing this right. Nothing was right. I didn't tell them all that, but I was just obnoxious. And then I'd feel like the Lord would give me a great sermon. I'd feel excited about the word, but I felt an inability to really deliver it. I feel like halfway through, this is not connecting like he gave it to me, just frustrated. And I knew I needed to be in another place. I don't know if the people could see the mismatch as much as I could. Everything was good then. My children were grown. You know, all the things you work to put in place were in place. But there was an irritation. There was a scratch. The breeches of the priest in the Old Testament were not supposed to itch. If you know that text, it should be sweatless. And my breeches were itching. It was not a comfortable place to stand from one service to another. I had an impetus for 2 things. One came maybe in an open vision. I'm not interpreting dreams or offering dreams or suggesting them, but I had a glimpse in my mind or heart or spirit, wherever it was, of myself moving through some hallways and stages and doors and corridors, and it took forever to get to the pulpit. And I said, well, where is this I'm going to minister? It must be at our campground on the East Coast. And I kind of put that away. And then the second thing was I had never gone to my boss doesn't hear this, but I really don't care, to a mega fest. I enjoyed him on the TV. I loved his tapes. I didn't buy him, but I listened to him and somebody gave him to me. And I thought he was a voice, a global voice that was impactful. And like many, many pastors, I listened to him before I went to church, but I wasn't a follower, if you understand. I saw him as an icon. I'm not as perfect as a human. And I so appreciated his ministry, but I was not a follower, other than I listened to the services on the way to, we had a different time zone on the way to my services, and thought he was great. Um, and this one year, I felt compelled to go to MegaFest. It was about a week beforehand. I never had wanted to go to MegaFest. I never wanted to go to Woman Idols. I never wanted to go anything. I was content to watch what I could and see it. I was too busy working. But when I get a desperation, everybody look out. My mother, she was in a wheelchair. We were raising a daughter. I had not birthed, but my mother to her, as far as we're concerned, from the age of 4. So I had a young child then. I was going back over child rearing, packing lunches, doing all of that, a family member's child. And I had to find a place to go with my mother, couldn't leave her and the daughter, and my boys were grown or near grown, to get to Atlanta. I couldn't find a hotel, everything was booked out. Someone, a woman pastor in the city said, there's room in our hotel, it's walking distance, you'll be close to your mother, you can get there, fine. I got to Atlanta and the hotel was not walking distance. It was too far to leave a sick mother. Something happened. My daughter called. I couldn't get there fast. And took all I had to really muster to get there in I'm saying a week, but a few days. I got there, said, I can't take that. We sat in the lobby of the main convention center. Bishop Reams saw me. Had been a long time. We were neighbors, so we had some fellowship, but I hadn't been a part of her ministry. She said, I happen to have a VIP pass in the extra hotel room right here in the hotel connected to the where the meeting was. So that worked out. Went down to the meeting, saw people I knew, had no fellowship, sat a whole whatever many days. I said, Lord, you told me to come here, and I did come, and nothing is happening. And what am I looking for anyway? So I went through the week. I think I caught Bishop Jakes' glance, maybe, in leaving the service through the backstage, since I had a VIP pass. I'm not even sure I even had an introduction. Now, I had sat on pulpits with him at meetings, but there was no, he might have been down there and I was on the pulpit on this end, and it is what it is. So I went home and I said, well, Lord, I listened, wasted a lot of money, a lot of time, put my family through a lot, but I did what you said do, and that's it. So that went along. And this was, again, around 2000, 2001. I was sitting in the office again. That time I was vice president of human resources for City Team Ministries that placed the missionaries in 94, 96 countries. So I trained missionaries for global ministry. And I got a call again, kind of like that White House call. And somebody called and said, Bishop Jakes wants to know, can you come preach this Sunday? I said, Jakes who? They said, TD Jakes. I said, hold on, let me check my calendar. There was nothing on my calendar but my regular thing. I got up, I ran all the way around the walls of the office. It was a long way around. I ran all the way around. This is a white missionary, parachurch ministry, saying, thank you, Jesus. And I went back and said, I can come when you want me to be there. And that opened another fountain of grace. And he has been used of God in this late season in my life in a controversial way, because my home movement didn't understand why I would leave Wesleyan Holiness, even though I was very charismatic. And they called and said, you must have sinned, you left God, you backslid. And he writes about women, and how could he know more about women, and women know about women, all kind of things. I said, well, whatever, I'm here. So you work with it. So I came, he took my husband and I out to lunch after service. He said, you know what? He said, I've been meaning to call you to preach for me. I think he said 21, it was either 21 or 22 years. I cried through the rest of the lunch. And my response to him was, you mean to tell me you couldn't find a phone number for me in 20 some years? I'm asking God, am I making a difference? Am I on track? Am I seeing the growth I need to see? And now you tell me that for over 2 decades, you couldn't get me, you didn't try to reach me. That was a lot of nerve, but I was angry and crying. And he thought it was funny. He sat there and smiled at him. I guess he said, that's the way the Lord works. He wasn't the least bit perturbed. he kind of laughed and chuckled, and I almost kicked my husband because he was about to laugh. And I sat there and wept because the Lord had shown me years before. I was on the road with Claudette Copeland, Iona Locke. We didn't travel with Jackie McCullough. I'm not using titles, I mean no disrespect, but it was during that season. Notable names. We were all on the board together. Millicent, she was Hunter, I think she was Thompson then. Pat McKinstry, Daryl Hines' wife was like baby sister, Bishop Amos. We traveled together, and I was seeing a little more, not less than them, but academia can carry a stigma sometimes in a charismatic Pentecostal environment, and you have to decide to be who you are. They were well-educated women. I'm not suggesting that, but my style, my voice, my delivery was not what you would anticipate as that evangelistic Pentecostal approach. And when I danced, they tell me you dance like a duck. So I didn't even have the right shout. I didn't see anything wrong with it. It was mine, but nevertheless. So don't let me forget what I'm trying to tell you. In those years, I had this kind of open thought. I had seen myself. This actually was a dream, let me be honest. There were all these vehicles going down the road. They looked like spaceships, but they were on the road. They were so modern. They were so fabulous. They were past Tesla back in those days, just whizzing. And I was in this vision of mine. You know those little trains that they have in the children's zoo that ride through and the children wave at the goats? I'm sitting in a little train. They're whizzing by me, zoom, zoom, just going. And I'm sitting in the little car on the little train that you see in the children's zoo, waving to all my friends go by. And you all may not have had that, but I've had seasons where I felt like what I was reaping didn't match what I was sowing. And I was consistent in sowing. But I want to let you know, hallelujah, that what God does is so on time. And I spent years traveling with them, being blessed. They groomed me. I grew from being among them. I think I spoke one morning breakfast and maybe one lunch, but I was the seminar leader. I couldn't work the crowd up like they did. I didn't bring in the offerings. I only was my good friend. She was from Pittsburgh. So we were all close. There was no dissension, but I didn't have what the people seemed to hunger for. And you got people there to give them what they want. That wasn't me. So I became the chief seminar leader and the chief planner for the meetings. And that was all. And they say, okay, let James do that. Let James do this. You better call that one to pray. Let James do this. The 2 times that I recall, maybe there was 3, where I might have been on the main stage, the Lord used that time in a phenomenal way till it almost scared me. But basically over a number of years, that was it. So I had this experience of being content, but yet desperate to watch my friends go, but do what I was called to do. And when he said that to me, 20 some years, I was like, if you had just called me 10 of those years ago, do you know what that would have did for my career? Do you know what that would have did for open doors? Do you know what that would have done for my internal struggle, my self-evaluation, my self-defacement? If you had just said you tried to get me and couldn't, he thought it was humorous. He said, no, I guess he knew this is the time. So he invited us. That was 2005 to come to Texas. So my husband and I went home and talked about it. It was a nice shot in the arm, but it wasn't a season for me, Lee. My ministries weren't in the right place. I had taken a position at our national office, leadership development and church health for over 2,000 congregations. I couldn't just walk out. They never had a Black woman there before, and they probably never will again. And it was right under the director, and they knew for sure I wasn't going to move up to the top spot. So you're glad to be the assistant. In our movement, the top person is not a presiding, like in Kojic. it's the general director. It's a wonderful general director, and he stuck his neck out, bringing the black woman right behind him. But I knew that was the ceiling, and I don't like to hit my head. But I had just gotten there. So it was not the time to go. My parents, I couldn't leave them. My congregations were not in a place. It would have felt like abandonment, but I knew I needed to go. So we stayed 7 more years after he invited us. And finally, at the end of 7 years, he kept saying when he'd bring me down to minister, bring me to preach. I said to my husband one day, we were taking a walk. I said, the church is out of my heart. I can now leave it. Because I said, I'm glad to come here and preach, but I'm not leaving my church. I ain't leaving that. No. It was gone. It was out. I felt free. I felt ready to go. We needed a succession plan. And we called him and said, is the door still open? He said, I've been asking you for 7 years. So I'm waiting on you. So we came. And by that time, he had gotten to know my husband, so he had a position for him. My husband had retired by that time. He had been a city manager then, and he had been retired 3 years, so that worked out well. The daughter we were raising was graduating from high school. I couldn't abandon her, uproot her life, so she was graduating. I had nursed my dad, and he had passed away, and I had my mom at least at a stable place in health. So things had fallen together where we could leave. We needed a succession plan. Didn't have one in place. Knew there were 3 people in the congregation that we could recommend to the pastoral committee and search committee inside that we felt would be good in transition, and they could accept that or do a search. So I went to those 3 people. They didn't have any idea we were going to leave, and said, what's the Lord telling you? And one said, he's telling me to plant up in a nearby community. I said, all right. The next one said, he's telling me to go back to the church my grandmother planted and build it up again. He said, all right. Went to the third one and said, what's the Lord telling you? That one said, I know it's time for you all to end this podcast. Said, the Lord is saying, stay here and hold your arms up. So we went into prayer and fasting then, because we knew that was the one. And another brother who we hadn't gone to was also one of the leading elders in the church. We kind of knew he was the interim person. And so we presented to the congregation and said, if you are willing to look inside the ministry, we've sought the Lord. We've talked to these 3 persons. They didn't know why we were talking to them. They just thought I was doing a check-in. And we believe this person is the one to stay here. That church has grown beyond what I could do for it. It has blossomed, and God has used the pastor mightily. And I don't look back. People say, don't you want to go back? Not one day. Now, I thought I was stepping down because by this time I'm way past retirement age. I'm not going to pastor, thank the Lord. The bottom line budget is no longer on my shoulder. I don't have to discipline folks necessarily unless asked to. I don't have to bury any more people unless I choose to take that service. This is wonderful. I'm like, okay, I'm stepping down. I came to be a full academician to start a program with Regent University. After we moved here, that fell apart. I don't know what happened, but the president went to another seminary. The main administrator left. I don't know if they were fired or whatever. So that fell apart. It has now come back to life, but it's been 9 years later. So I was told, well, while we find a place for you, how about doing Wednesday night Bible study? Well, I left because I didn't want to prepare every week. That was my plan for coming here. I left all the 2 churches and the district and the national position to come in. I was still doing the mission work at the city team. And I got to prepare every week. And what was said to me is, we won't leave you doing that. I'm going to help you out some, and we'll have some other people rotate. Well, bless the Lord. He knew what he had for me. It kept me in the word and kept me praying. So for it's been 9 years this month I've been here. But before COVID, that would have been about 8 years or thereabouts. Most Wednesdays, I did the second service of the Potter's House. So we have a lot of 8 or 9 associate pastors. But my primary job was to prepare every week. Well, preaching's gone. I don't have the voice. I don't have the wind, all of that. But it was I thought a step down. I don't have to be I was asked, can you be an associate after being a senior pastor and a bishop? I said, yes, I can be an associate. I can be employed. I have no problem. I don't have to be up front. I'm very glad. So during the Wednesday night, I said, well, this is Bible study. That's all right. That's a way to go. I didn't realize that when I was walking to this auditorium sanctuary one week, and I had to come through some double doors, through security, into a room, because they don't, the way I comb my hair and makeup is tragic. So they have to fix me for the camera. That person gets paid at the church to get me ready for camera. I'll just be honest, because I didn't wear anything but face powder. And that was big in my church, my holiness church. I didn't need to. You just put on navy blue, brown, and black, and you can make it. So they fixed me up for the camera. And then I have to go down the hall, through some more security, down the hall, up an elevator, down another hall, down the steps, and now to do the Bible study. And after I got here and I was making that passage, I was reminded of what the Lord had shown me, where I had gone through those doors, all of that to get to the pulpit. And it was exactly what I had seen, but I had forgotten about it because I thought it was another appointment in the East Coast. So that's how I came to be here. What I thought was stepping down, by this time I'm well past retirement age, was a step up and a step out. Because all of a sudden, just talking to a few hundred, anywhere from 300 to 500 on a Wednesday night, I'm really talking to the whole globe, because this is not my platform. This is somebody who trusts me with his platform. It's not mine. I didn't dig it. It's not a well I dug. I didn't earn it, and I don't deserve it. But nevertheless, houses you didn't dig. You didn't build. Wells you didn't dig. Garden vineyards you didn't plant. I didn't plant anything to get to do that for 8 and some years. Then all of a sudden, having a Brazilian audience, having a Nigerian audience, having a Kenyan audience. I had since gone to Africa 3 or 4 times since that was my desire. But now in places that I didn't have to take my feet. And I was not just aghast because I wasn't prepared for what that level of exposure did. If you walk in the supermarket, people call you by your first name. I just moved here. You don't know me. Who are you talking to? Or people internationally, because they virtual, they feel like I know you. You must know me. And I began to marvel at how down is up in God. I began to marvel at how he does have people who are, but whatever people say about large stages and large personalities, who are comfortable enough to not only make jobs for hundreds of people, but to take what God has given to them that they sweated out. He sweated out those sermons and make it available to others. Not always the people who understand, because everybody in the church where I am, they didn't necessarily come from somewhere where women are in the pulpit, or where women preach, or where you can have a bishop in the church. I came using the academic title because I came to do an academic job. So when I was asked how I wanted to be listed in the church, I said as Dr. James, because I came to work with Regent, and I can work better with professors if they see the academic title. So sometimes women will say, how come she don't call herself bishop? I don't see her using the bishop. She's shamed. He won't let her. No, I came to do an academic job. So I chose to use that title to relate to Regent University rather than have them dismiss me as being a practitioner only. And so that has stuck, and it's been a blessing. So I use them interchangeably.
My God.
I don't think you have any more time left on this part.
Bishop James, we do thank you.